Right now, I believe that Mr. Tucker bring back the lawyers, at least for purposes of arguing this.
I can't do this. So I apologize. I don't have answers, but I also would love answers. I've also asked them if they're not calling Brian Roach when he saw them or Phil saw them. I want them to still be in Rock here, right? And I have to make a decision that we're not ultimately call them, but those are the only three on their list that I want if they don't call. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm having a warning, okay? I had really, really bad stomach issues all right too. That's why I left during the video. I was having stomach issues. I need to use the bathroom, but I'm fine now. I haven't had an issue since midnight and last night. So, did you take a look at those things I gave you? Look at them now. Yeah, I'm like not worried about that. I don't care. He's inaccurate on a lot of stuff. So him being accurate on that is not surprising. In his interviews, he's a fake. So I'm not worried about that. I'm going to talk to you about these later, okay? And no, I don't think, I will explain to you later why I do not think we should use that word on the door. I will explain exactly. Why is this important? Just tell me what number it is or where it is. I'm going to screenshot it and send it to Randy. It's on, it'll be in one of those thumbs. Yeah, I made a notation on the page. Which one? Hey Dash, after you grab the kids off at school, can you please print out the picture that's in this screenshot and bring it up to me at the court? Dash, if you text us, Elena might be able to run down and grab it, but I need a full printout of this. Dash, it's going to be a proposed exhibit I need to add on. But I need the full picture in the same format as all of these other pictures. Dash, this is from November 26th, and Jennifer posted it on Facebook. So you can look at the phone down here. Dash, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. That's the man. That's the shirt I gave you just in case nothing that you needed something. I was going to stay a whole hour. I wouldn't know where to stand. I was inside out. I guarantee they give you. The only reason I said that I knew that we weren't. That's how desperate I was. I'm going to.
All right, court is now in session. The Honorable Shirley Matthews presiding.
Good morning, and good to see you. All right.
Your Honor, can we go on the record prior to
We're going to put that down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, calling People v. Jennifer Crumbley, case number 222799990 FH.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Karen McDonald on behalf of the people.
Thank you, Marquise, on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Shannon Smith on behalf of Jennifer Crumbley.
All right, all the jurors are here, which is always a good start to the day. Anything?
Yes, Your Honor. I included the court on some emails last night between myself and the prosecution. I have 3 specific witnesses that they subpoenaed,
Okay.
that I've asked them to hold the subpoenas on.
Okay,
But the prosecution, I know that a trial is a moving part, has lots of moving parts.
okay.
I need to know when the defense case is going to begin, because I cannot coordinate with witnesses and have them sitting here all day, every day.
Do you think it's gonna be today or tomorrow?
Judge, as I indicated in the email last night, there were
I
9,
read it at 4 o'clock this morning, yeah,
there are 9 potential prosecution witnesses left.
yeah,
Counsel this morning indicated that she would like Wendy and Phil Sodden here, as well as Brian Maloche. They've been subpoenaed.
all right.
Mr. and Mrs. Sodden are her client's parents. They've been contacted and told to come sit in the court unless and until the defense counsel or the prosecution chooses not to call them. So I can't predict when the trial is going to end for the prosecution.
Okay,
I can tell the court, no, we have a potential of 9 witnesses left. As the evidence comes in, we may decide to call all 9, or we may not decide, as we do in every single case, Judge.
okay, so let's check in after lunch and about 3 or 4 o'clock. Right?
I would appreciate that. I am having a very difficult time because the prosecution is not extending professional courtesy to me to give me any information, and I'm dealing with my own witnesses. I'm in court doing this. I am a one-man show, and the very least that could happen is them telling me who's going to be called and who's not.
This
Judge,
happens in every trial. This happens in every trial. Yesterday, the first witness was 2 hours late, so that impacts things, right? So the weather impacted things. So I don't think that they are not obligated to tell you in what order and who is next, but I think that they have been extending a professional courtesy. I understand your
Thank you, Judge.
difficulty, and we're gonna do our best. You know, it's also hard to predict how long the witness will be. Some witnesses, and there were witnesses where you had no questions, which is great, right? But there are witnesses that you spent some time on. There are witnesses they spent a long time on. So it's hard to predict. We're gonna check in several times today. I'm not gonna tell you your witness isn't in the hallway so you can't call them. I'm not gonna do that.
I understand. I guess my fear is that if we get to a point where suddenly they have no witnesses, and I don't have witnesses here because I had no heads up, I don't want this court to be mad at me that we're wasting time. I am trying my absolute best. That's
know
what I
you
want
are.
the court to
This is the
know.
heads up. This is the heads up.
I'm aware. I have sat where you are sitting and had to coordinate witnesses, and I know how difficult it is. I am aware. So I understand that. All right. So don't worry about that. We will check in several times today and see how it's going. I mean, things happen. Things happen. Witnesses are quicker than we thought, or take longer than we thought. So I obviously am very interested in keeping the trial moving, which is what we're going to do right now.
That's great, Judge.
Okay,
And
let's bring
we
it in.
indicated let's just have defense counsel's witnesses ready to go, as we have, and
Right,
we're gonna go as-
when? That's all I want to know. Like, what day?
I don't
Even a
think
day.
they don't
That's-
know. They
Okay.
don't know. It doesn't sound like it's going to be today.
Well, that was
If
my
they
big
have 9
concern.
witnesses.
Last night I was emailing them because I didn't know if they would get through today.
Okay, sometimes a witness is 10 minutes long.
I
It
understand.
might be today. It
It's
might
not
be.
your first rodeo, Miss Smith. You've
Which is
been-
why I've
yeah.
seen this unfold before, and when
Okay.
they said our case will be done by the end of the week, that's far, far sooner than we've ever expected, which is fine and great news.
Yeah,
So I'm just trying to plan.
I understand. I've been there many, many, many times. So let's do it. Let's bring them in.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Judge.
Jeff.
What does it look like? Because I'm not seeing it. Oh, thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies be seated. Thank you for your promptness. Prosecutor, who's the next witness?
Lieutenant Sam Mars.
Good morning.
Morning.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give is the truth so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, could you step up and have a seat? And then would you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
Sam Marsban, first name's S-A-M, last name M-A-R-Z-B-A-N.
Go ahead, prosecutor.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning.
Can you tell the jury what your occupation is and how long you've been doing that?
I'm a detective lieutenant with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. It'll be 20 years in July.
And as a lieutenant in your capacity right now, what are your duties?
I'm the commander of the City of Pontiac Detective Bureau.
And what does the City of Pontiac Detective Bureau do? What sort of investigations?
We do investigations, everything from minor property offenses all the way up to homicide.
All right, and in your over 20 years of experience, how many homicide investigations have you taken part in?
Well over 100.
Okay. I want to take you to November 30th, 2021. Do you remember that day?
Yes.
All right. At some point, were you informed that there was a school shooting at Oxford High School?
Yes, I was in the Pontiac substation. I was informed there was an active shooter at Oxford High School.
And what did you do?
I grabbed my radio, went down to my car, and there were other detectives gearing up, loading up in unmarked cars, and we went lights and sirens to Oxford High School.
Okay, and when you arrived, can you describe what you observed when you pulled into the complex?
So we pulled in. There was a heavy presence on the north side of the building. So we moved around. We put our vehicles on the east side of the building, so there was some coverage there. And then we put our vests on, grabbed our rifles, and went in through the east side of the building.
And if you know, do you know what time that was?
It was probably shortly after 1 p.m.
Okay, and at that point when you entered the building, and you said you grabbed your gear, can you describe what that means?
A ballistic vest, rifle, handgun, and police radio.
Okay. What information did you have when you entered the building?
As we were pulling in, we could see ambulances were leaving. There were still ambulances on scene. We knew that there had been several casualties, both fatal and non-fatal. As we were getting ready to go in, we learned that there was one suspect in custody. Everything was there's so much information coming in, it wasn't clear yet at that point if there was another person involved or not.
So it wasn't clear whether there was one shooter or more than one shooter?
That information was evolving as we were basically getting ready to go in.
Okay. When you entered the building, did you ever make contact with Lieutenant Willis, who's sitting next to me?
Yes, after we were searching the building and we evacuated some students, I did make contact with Lieutenant Willis.
Okay, so backing up, what was the first thing you did when you entered the building?
The first thing we did, I had a team of probably 3 other detectives that were with me, and we conducted a systematic search, making sure there was no other victims, no other shooters inside. There were still students locked in classrooms, and once we made those areas safe where we could safely evacuate them, we brought those students out so that they can be taken to another location and be picked up by family. Once that was all done, we did that primary search of the entire school. That's when I went to the front office and I met with Lieutenant Willis and the other investigators.
Can you describe to the jury what that experience of coming across a classroom where there are kids in it, how did you evacuate that classroom safely, and what were the difficulties in getting into the door?
Well, the doors had been locked and barricaded, so we had to identify ourselves. I was not one of the people communicating. I was more in a supervisory role, trying to coordinate with the radio and other teams that were searching the schools, but we wanted to make sure that there was a safe path, that we weren't going to bring them out into harm's way, so we made sure that whatever route out of the building that they had, there was police presence there.
Were there any other concerns evacuating kids other than their safety going through the hallways? Were you concerned about anything else?
Yes, we obviously didn't want them to be exposed to areas of the school that were a crime scene. The area that I had searched,
initially upon entry there was no victims in the hallways.
Okay. What is it you do if you're trying to evacuate a classroom in a hallway where there are victims there? How did you shield those kids from that?
Basically, you would set up a screen. It would be like a screen of law enforcement personnel shielding their view from seeing what occurred.
Okay. About how long did it take you to direct these primary and secondary searches?
I was only involved in the primary search. I would say it was probably about an hour.
Okay. And you said at some point you went and met up with Lieutenant Willis or the command?
Yes, I met with Lieutenant Willis and other investigators from the Special Investigations Unit.
And I think sometimes we get lost about, we assume people know things. Talk to me about the ranking system at the sheriff's office. Lieutenant's a pretty high rank, is that right?
Yes, it'd be a command officer.
Right, and then, so who's above a lieutenant?
A captain.
Okay, and did you have any captains in the building that day?
I believe Captain Hill was there.
Okay,
I could hear his voice on the radio.
all right. Other than that, were there other lieutenants?
Lieutenant Willis, I think there's been some promotions since. I can't recall anyone
Okay,
else.
so what did you do when you were done with that? What was your responsibility?
I had.
What were you assigned to, or what did you choose to do?
I was requested to identify two of the deceased victims that were in the hallway.
Okay. And you said you've been involved in a lot of homicide investigations.
Yes.
Did this feel different to you?
Yes, it was kind of surreal with it being in a school, a place where kids are supposed to be safe. Most of them are, in houses that I've been involved in, or streets, or businesses, so it was different.
Okay. Can you describe what you did?
I met up with a school counselor, I believe, was Pamela Fine, and then Jim Rourke, who was a retired police officer and also school security. And we were tasked to identify two of the deceased victims.
And how did you do that, Lieutenant?
I went down to the south hallway where they were located.
Was that the 200 hallway?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
The first victim had a coat on her. They were covering basically her upper torso and her head. There was a backpack next to her. It wasn't on her. Deputy Freiberg was with me as well, and he looked through the backpack, found some school assignments.
And at some point, were you able to determine who that girl was on the floor?
Yes.
And who was it?
Hannah St. Juliana.
Okay. And what did you do?
We looked at the mobile phone that Jim O'Rourke had, and were able to identify her based on her school picture.
Okay. And what was the purpose of doing this?
So we could notify next of kin.
Okay. And what did you do next?
I went further east down that hallway. There was another female victim lying on the ground, again with a coat over her head, and she was wearing a backpack.
She was still wearing it?
She was still wearing a backpack.
Do you know could you see where her injury was?
She had a gunshot wound to the head.
And what did you do?
I went into that backpack. I found a wallet. I found a driver's license in that wallet with the name Madison Baldwin. I looked at the picture. I moved the coat off her head. She had blood and hair covering her face, so I ended up moving her hair out of her face to identify her from her driver's license.
Was anyone with you at the time?
Deputy Freiberg was with me. I believe Pam Fine was with me, and Jim Rourke, and there was other law enforcement personnel in the hallway.
Okay, thank you. What did you do next?
I went back to the front office after we identified the two, and then I was requested to prepare a search warrant for the shooter's residence.
Okay. At that point, what did you have anything of obtained from the shooter?
In preparation for the affidavit for the search warrant, basically, so I can put the facts in to request the court grant the court order.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I just want to back up. I need to ask that question first, which I think you knew. What was the purpose of the search warrants of the home?
To look for any more evidence related to the homicide investigation.
Okay. And is that something you normally do?
Yes.
All right. And I'm sorry I interrupted you. What did you, as a matter of protocol, did you look at anything that was obtained from the shooter?
I did.
What was that?
There was a couple things I looked at. I'm sorry, was your question specifically what was obtained from the shooter?
Yes, and why did you need to obtain those things?
I looked at the shooter's cell phone. It was a locked screen. However, on the phone, when you could see that the messages had been received, so I could see what messages. I couldn't go into the phone, obviously, but there was messages displayed on the screen, and I could see what those text messages were and
Okay.
where they're from.
Were you the first person to look at that phone?
No.
Okay. Were you the first person to press the button so the screen would appear, if you know?
I don't even think I pressed any button. I don't know.
It's
If
okay.
you move the phone, sometimes when I pick up my personal phone, if I move it, the screen will light up and the lock screen will appear. So
Okay.
I can't recall if I pressed any buttons or not.
Okay. Where were you when you had the phone and it lit up?
I was in the front of the school by the administrative offices.
Okay. Is there anyone with you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Detective Anchor from the computer crime.
Okay. I'm going to put on the screen People's 343. I don't believe there's an objection, but I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, you said 343?
It's the shooter's phone.
It's a screen capture of the shooter's phone.
We have no objection. Thank you.
343 is the one.
All right, Lieutenant, is that your hand?
Yes.
Okay. And what are we looking at?
This was the cell phone that was recovered from the shooter.
Okay. And we're going to try to magnify for a minute. The first message there, can you read what it says and who it's from?
The message is from Mom, who was sent 1 hour prior. It says, Ethan, don't do it. The second,
Hold on one moment. 1 hour prior to what exactly?
1 hour prior to whatever real time was, so 1 hour prior to 3:03 p.m. approximately.
Okay. Do you know when the shooting began?
12:51, I believe.
Okay. And how long was Ethan don't do it after the shooting began? How long, what was the time span between the shooting began and that text came in?
The exact time's not displayed on there, it's just approximate of 1 hour, but I would say at least an hour after the shooting.
Okay, we have that in another exhibit, but, okay, and the next text, who's that from and what does it say?
It says, Dad, Ethan, call me now.
All right, and then the next text,
It's from a phone number that is not listed as a contact, and it says, did you get shot?
okay. Is it, I don't want to ask a leading question, were you able to tell from that screenshot what order those are in? Is the top one the most recent text, or is the bottom one the most recent text?
The bottom would be the most recent.
Okay. And at that moment, it says, what is it, 47 minutes ago? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What, if anything, did you perceive when you looked at that phone? Did it cause any concern for you?
With the other information that I had, it provided knowledge that the senders of those text messages.
Objection, Your Honor, is to speculation of what Mrs. Crumbley's knowledge was. That would be speculation.
So, I don't think he got a chance to say, but
Okay,
his,
can you repeat the question?
yeah, but I just asked him to finish the answer because I don't think he's talking about her knowledge. Talk to me about what, you said you did a search warrant for the electronics included, correct?
Yes, I was
Okay.
referring to my knowledge.
Yes, I know that, I was trying to
Okay.
let you finish, but go ahead.
So it provided me with information that the sender of these text messages were aware of the source.
Your Honor, this is, again, the sender of the text messages was aware. He cannot testify to what the sender of text messages was aware of. That's speculation.
Your Honor, I'll move on.
I guess it is.
This is information that he is receiving in real time to perform his duties of an investigation. We're simply trying to establish why and what he did next.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think the jury gets it.
okay.
And Your Honor, when I object, I would ask that the court consider the objection prior to Ms. McDonald's.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
One moment. I have a right to respond to an objection because that's
Okay,
the court, those are the court rules. I'm not gonna ask the question before the court rules, but before the court rules on the objection,
Okay, but when she objected, you didn't respond to the objection.
I was trying to respond. I really
Okay.
was.
Okay.
I'm trying to explain to the court that this is what we're doing, so.
Okay, all right, well, it's.
I'm
a
not
legal
gonna
objection and-
start asking questions without our ruling.
Okay,
Lieutenant, what concerned you about this and what did you do next?
It concerned me, there was relevant information on electronic devices related to the shooting that had occurred. With that, I viewed the surveillance video from the school, and I also observed the firearm that was used in the shooting in preparation for the search warrant. So it helped me basically collect information that what we might be looking for in the home that we were seeking the search warrant for.
Okay, and do you know Special Agent Brandon from the ATF?
I do.
Okay, he testified early in these proceedings. Was he present with you at the school and assist in any way?
I do remember seeing him in the school.
Okay. What did you do? Well, can you tell the jury what you requested in your affidavit for a search warrant and why?
What I requested was any and all evidence related to the homicide investigation, which included firearms, ammunition, firearms accessories like holsters or magazines, notes, receipts, electronic devices to include tablets, computers, cell phones, because we know that in these types of investigations, messages could be sent to other individuals that might be witnesses or be a part of that investigation in addition to plans. So I guess that's just it.
At that point, were you informed or did you observe anything in the shooter's backpack that was found in one of the bathrooms?
I did not look through his backpack.
Okay, so what did you do next?
I had to have my laptop, because I left quickly. I had to have my laptop brought to me to the school, and I sat there, I typed out a search warrant and swore to that search warrant from the school, and then once it was authorized, I let my detectives that had secured that residence, that the judge had signed the court order, and they can begin searching.
Did you speak to any of the students in the school that day?
I did.
Who did you speak to?
I believe his name was Keegan.
And can you tell the court why you spoke to Keegan and where he was during the shooting?
I spoke to him very briefly. He was, when I talked to him, he was in one of the counselor's offices, and in my role, I was in a supervisory role over the detective bureau, so I was trying to assist Lieutenant Willis, and I was directing my detectives basically to handle the interviews. And then I learned that Keegan had witnessed a homicide in the bathroom, and he was obviously very shaken up, and he was sitting in the counselor's office. Partly I didn't want him to be alone, so I directed Detective Stevens to stay with him and gather information from him.
And that, do Do you know that victim's name? You're talking about Justin Schilling, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you speak to Keegan because he had information that you needed about the shooter?
Yes, he did have information about the shooter as well.
Okay. Was that bathroom the site of the last student that was murdered?
Yes.
Okay. Did you direct or ask anybody to go to the house after you wrote the search warrant or while you were writing it?
While I was writing it, I asked them to go to the house.
Do you remember who you asked?
At that
Or I
time,
guess you ordered. But.
several different detectives there at that time. Lieutenant Hicks before he was promoted, he was Sergeant Hicks, so he was my partner in the detective bureau. So I told him we need to get a team to go secure that house. I believe it was him, Detective Stoyak, and Detective Steele.
And what can you tell the jury what that means to secure the house?
Basically, it's a protective suite. So your purpose isn't to search for evidence yet while you're waiting for that search warrant to be signed, but you want to make sure there is no one in that structure destroying any evidence before you can get that search warrant, because obviously it does take time to draft the document and get the judge to authorize it. So it was basically preventative from allowing stuff to be destroyed or taken out of the house.
Prior to drafting the search warrant, did you watch any surveillance video?
I did.
Can you tell the jury what you viewed?
I watched the surveillance video of that south hallway. I believe the 200 hallway shows the shooter going into the bathroom, coming out moments later, and then immediately the shooter began firing on students as he walked east down that hallway.
Were you able to determine what weapon was used?
Yes.
How did you determine that?
The weapon, by the time I saw that weapon, it was already brought to the front of the school. Crime lab specialist Rachel Grace had it in her possession. It was collected in an evidence box, and it was a SIG 9mm handgun.
Okay, how long did it take for the search warrants to be signed and authorized by a judge?
Probably, it was under an hour, I would say.
Okay, and what did you do once you obtained the search warrant?
I called, I can't remember which detective I called, but one of the detectives on scene, I told him that it had been authorized.
When you say on scene, you mean?
I'm sorry, on scene, at the house.
All right, and when you say the house, you're talking about 112 East Street in Oxford, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and just for the record, did you determine who lived there?
I did.
And who lived there?
The shooter lived there, James and Jennifer Crumbley lived there as well.
Had you met any of those three people before that day?
No.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to meet Jennifer Crumbley?
Yes.
Do you see her in the courtroom today?
I do. She's sitting at the defense table with glasses and a gray jacket on.
All right, may the record reflect he's properly identified the defendant.
And the record would still reflect.
Do you remember about what time that you arrived on scene at the house?
I would say it was about 6:30 p.m.
Okay, what did you do?
The detectives there were already searching the residence. I checked on them, making sure that...
Okay, I want to back up because we can't assume. How did they know that the search warrant was authorized?
I called and told one of them.
Okay, and once you make that call, then you instruct them to start the search?
Yes.
Okay. How long do you think that they had been searching by the time you got there?
Maybe an hour.
Okay. What did you observe when you arrived? Was there anything going on outside, or was everybody inside?
Everybody was inside. I think there was uniformed cars outside as security.
Okay. Did you just have individuals from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, or were there other law enforcement agencies?
Brett Brandon from the ATF was there as well.
Okay. Special Agent Brandon?
Yes.
All right. Did you have an opportunity to interact with Jennifer Crumbley?
I did.
Can you tell the jury how that came to be?
They were not there when when I first arrived, they ended up showing up, I would say probably about 15 minutes later. Then by they, I mean James and Jennifer.
Did someone ask them to return to the home?
I believe so.
And do you know who that was?
I'm not 100% sure.
Did you ask that they return to the home?
I did not. I did not have contact with them prior.
Okay. Did you want them to return to the home?
Yes.
Why?
They had cell phones in their possession.
Okay. In a typical homicide case, do you seize the parents' phones?
If I determine that there's relevant information to the homicide investigation, yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury why you thought, I assume, were their phones, did you think they were relevant to the investigation?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury why?
Based on the information I learned at the school, I learned that a parent had been there earlier in the day with the shooter regarding drawings that were made on an assignment that were disturbing. Also, I had observed the shooter's phone that had messages that were related to the shooting.
And was there a particular message on that screenshot that made you want to search the phone?
Yes.
What was it?
Ethan, don't do it.
And who sent that text?
Mom,
Okay.
Jennifer Crumbley.
All right. Can you explain what happened when Jennifer and James Crumbley returned to the home?
The search was still ongoing by detectives, so I had them sit in the front living room when they came in. I explained to them the process. James had asked for an itemized list of the items that were taken out of the home, and I explained to them that we leave a copy of the search warrant, the court order authorizing what we were taking, and then we leave tabulations, basically a receipt, just documenting what items that we had taken. I instructed them that I did need both of their cell phones.
And then how did Jennifer react to that?
She was not happy about that.
Okay, when you say she wasn't happy, what do you mean? Describe what that means.
She did not want to give me her phone. She seemed irritated about it initially. She was not turning it over promptly.
Did she say, I'm not giving it to you, or I don't want to give it to you, or did she say anything?
I don't remember the exact language, but I believe it was that she did not want to give it to me.
Okay, then what happened?
I explained to her that, it's part of the court order, part of the search warrant, and it was necessary that we collect the cell phone. That's when James interrupted and basically explained to her he's going to get that cell phone one way or another, might as well just turn it over to him. And then she did turn it over.
And when you say she turned it over, what does that mean? She gave it to you?
She handed it to me.
Okay. And what did you do next?
She was concerned about having phone numbers for family members. I allowed her to, I took a sheet of paper and I allowed her to write down necessary phone numbers out of her phone, and then
I want to back up a bit. How did you get into the phone? Was
she
there a
gave me a
passcode?
password.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to make a clear record. Was it password protected?
I believe it was, yes.
Okay, and how did you get the password?
She provided the password to me.
And can you tell the jury what that exchange was like?
Again, she did not want to give the password. We have the capabilities, obviously, with our computer crimes unit. When we have a search warrant, we can bypass the security.
Did you explain that to her?
I believe I did.
Okay. And did you tell her that that's what you were going to do if she didn't give the password?
Yes.
Okay. So did she finally give it to you?
Yes.
All right. And then you said you allowed her to write down some things. What did she write down?
She wrote down some phone numbers from contacts out of her phone.
All right. And did you instruct the defendants to do anything after you seized their phones?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what that was?
I told them they needed to contact, and they needed to get. She was concerned about being able to call people, so I instructed her she could go get a replacement, basically a prepaid phone from a local store, and that it was important that we had that number, that she was to contact either myself or Sergeant Joe Bryan.
Did you ask her to do that in a timely way, or did you not mention when they should provide that?
I don't recall specific language, but I believe it was important that we had that number that night. I don't remember what my wording was, but I would say timely, yes.
Okay, are you aware if they did provide those new phone numbers?
They did not provide it to me. I don't know if they provided it to Sergeant Ryan or not.
Okay. What is the protocol when you seize a phone and there's a search warrant to search the information on a phone?
First thing I do is I put it into airplane mode. That way it cannot be remotely wiped. So once we put it in airplane mode, it's basically, again, a preservation to prevent the destruction of information on that phone.
Okay. The exchange about the seizing of the phones, what did you say in response to that resistance, if anything?
I believe I just explained it wasn't an option not to take the phone. It was a court order. And I'm trying to be professional about it and say we're going to take the phone, and I didn't want her to try and resist us taking the phone.
Was there any discussion about the students who were injured or killed in that school by the defendant?
Not by the defendant, no.
Did you say anything about that?
Yes.
What did you say?
I could tell she was kind of frustrated about the situation, the phone, things like that, and I explained to her.
Your objection to hearsay as to what this officer said.
His statements are, what is the objection?
About what
object-
she said to
my
your client,
objection-
what you said to your client?
About what he said to my client. My client's statements are clearly not hearsay. I'm objecting to what he said to my client as hearsay.
He's the declarant. It's not an out of court statement. He's the actual person testifying. And additionally, this is giving context to the exchange at the house with the defendant.
Your Honor, there is no I said it exception to hearsay, so even though he's the declarant, there's no I said it exception where he can still testify to hearsay.
That's true.
Your Honor, I believe that his statements about what he did during the investigation, which I've elicited several times while he's been on the stand, are relevant to show what he did and why he did it.
Just because there have been things that I have not objected to doesn't mean that I couldn't have objected
Okay,
to. But
okay.
I'm objecting at this point. It's not legally correct.
Okay, so, I guess one question is whether they're being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
If they are, can I respond to that?
Yeah, well, let me back up a little bit. Mrs. Crumbley did not ask you a question about that, about
No.
what happened, if there are fatalities at the school.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
His statement to Mrs. Crumbley about what happened at the school is not being offered to prove what happened at the school. We've proven that 100 different ways, unfortunately. It's being offered to show what he did and the response of the defendant.
Yeah, I'm gonna allow it. It's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, right?
Thank you. What did you say to the defendant?
I told her that there were several dead kids and kids that were shot in the school, and this was significant incidents and was already on the national news, and even the president had addressed it.
How did you know that?
From seeing the news cameras outside and speaking to other people
Okay.
on scene.
All right. Was Jennifer Crumbley crying?
No.
Was Jennifer Crumbley, what were her mannerisms or gestures at that point?
She seemed irritated and frustrated. I remember taking notes down, and she made a statement to me saying that lives were lost today, and he's going to have to suffer. And I found that odd, the way she said it.
Why?
Because she was referring to a person that was her son. And again, I've been involved in multiple homicide investigations where I've talked to relatives and parents that their children had taken lives, and normally it was...
Your Honor, I'm objecting to the relevance of what other people have said. Obviously, her statement is allowed. The detective testified to what she said, but drawing conclusions about what she was thinking as she said it is speculation.
Response?
He's not drawing conclusions about what she was thinking. He's drawing conclusions about what he was thinking. He said he found it odd, and I'm asking him why. And I think in the course of this investigation, an officer's perceptions about the defendant's statements and they're being odd compared to what he sees in over 100 different homicide investigations are absolutely relevant. In addition, we are proving our burden, as the court instructed the jury, is to prove gross negligence and what a person using ordinary care would have to do to prevent injury or death to somebody else. And her statements and how they compare to any person, reasonable, ordinary person, are definitely relevant.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I have to continue, I have to argue based on this argument. This detective, who is very experienced, has never investigated a mass shooting at a school. So he does not have awareness of how parents of mass shooters typically respond, because this is a first.
I don't think he said that. I think he has interviewed or had contact with parents whose children have killed people before. So to the extent that you're speculating about, you hadn't met her before this, right?
Correct, Judge.
So, okay, so you can't speculate about what she's thinking, how she's feeling, how she would normally respond. Okay, there's some people that, when someone falls, they laugh, which might seem inappropriate, but that's how that person is, right? But you can testify about your experience, why you thought it was odd based on your experience in interacting with other parents who had children who had killed people.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. All right.
Can you continue with why you felt it was odd? Can you tell the jury?
Yes, the language of suffer struck me as odd. Most of my experience as well, even...
I want to stop you. What do you mean suffer? Explain to me what you mean the language of suffer.
said he's going to have to suffer.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Most of my experience as well, there's going to be consequences, or, we understand the severity of the situation, that the choice of words suffer was odd to me.
Okay, all right. Nothing further.
Ross.
Thank you. Detective, when you testified about giving Mrs. Crumbley the search warrant for the phone, it's fair to say, at least to your knowledge, Mrs. Crumbley has never had a search warrant to take her phone away from her, correct?
I don't have any knowledge of that.
And when she was expressing concerns to you about not having her cell phone, one of those concerns was that she would not have phone numbers to people on her contact list. Is that true?
Yes, that's why I allowed her to copy her contact list.
She also expressed concern that if she didn't have her phone, she would have no way to call people. I guess what I'm saying is that was the only phone of Mrs. Crumbley that you were taking with the search warrant, correct?
I'm sorry, but you said that was the only phone?
You took one phone for Mrs. Crumbley.
Yes.
You don't believe she had other cell phones at that time?
I would not know if she did or not.
So when you were taking that cell phone, if that was her only phone, it would be fair to say she wouldn't have a phone to use after that.
Yes, that's why I suggested she go purchase another phone from a store that was open.
You suggested she go and purchase what some people refer to as burner phones or track phones.
A prepaid phone, yes.
So you can go to a store, buy a prepaid phone, and it'll have a different phone number, correct?
Yes.
And you advised the Crumbleys, in order to have phones, go ahead and buy these phones.
I suggested, yes, you should buy another phone and provide that number to us.
You did allow Mrs. Crumbley to sit down and write contact numbers out so that she could put them in whatever phone she bought?
Yes.
And you're aware that by that night, the Crumbleys did purchase track phones? And if you're not aware, just let me know.
I learned later in the investigation, but I wasn't involved in that part of it.
Okay, fair enough. Again, very quickly, you had never met with or had any dealings with Mrs. Crumbley?
That's correct.
You have never seen her react to anything in life, a pet dying, a person dying, bad news about a job, anything like that.
My only encounter with her was at that house.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Nothing further, may this witness be excused.
You can step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Who's the next witness?
David Hendrick.
David, I'm sorry, can you say the Hendrick?
Hendrick, yes, Judge. He's in the hallway.
Good morning. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please be seated and you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name.
David Hendrick, D-A-V-I-D-H-E-N-D-R-I-C-K.
Go ahead, prosecutor.
Thank you. Sir, are you currently a member with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office?
I am not.
Okay. And were you at one point?
I was.
How long did you work with the Sheriff's Office?
34 years.
Okay. And you recently retired?
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to direct your attention to the days around November the 30th, 2021.
Okay.
When you retired, what was your rank?
Detective Sergeant,
In what unit were you assigned to?
the Fugitive Apprehension Team.
If you could, sir, please tell the jury what is the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
It is a team made up of a handful of sheriff's detectives that go out and look for people wanted for felony warrants. We either felony warrants that are issued by the sheriff's department or sheriff's department cases, or other law enforcement agencies in the county that have requested our assistance in locating those individuals.
Okay. And as of November of 2021, how long have you been assigned to the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
4 years, I believe.
Okay. And did you retire out of that unit?
I did.
So all told, how long did you spend as a detective sergeant in the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
A little over 6.
6 years? Okay. Now, what roles did you have with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office before you were in the Fugitive Team?
Prior to that, I was assigned to our Special Investigations Unit for approximately 10 years.
And that's the unit that Lieutenant Willis heads up right now?
That is correct.
Okay. And what about before that?
Prior to that, I was assigned to our Auto Theft Unit for a period of time. All those as sergeants. I was also assigned into our Auto Theft Unit as a deputy prior to getting promoted to sergeant. And as a patrol investigator, which is a substation detective, prior to that
Okay.
for a few years.
And then prior to that, were you on the road as a patrol deputy?
I was.
In your 6 years working with the Fugitive Apprehension Team, could you put a number on how many fugitives you've sought?
Hundreds.
Okay.
Several hundred.
And that's probably a conservative number?
Yes.
Now, are you trained to locate someone who does not want to be found?
Yes.
All right. Now, what are some things that a person might do if they don't want to be located?
Leave their residence. They often will stop communicating with family, friends, things of that nature.
Okay. What about funds?
Yes, a lot of times they will try to rely on cash.
Why is that?
I think it's harder to track any type of financial transaction if you're using cash.
Okay. Now, as a detective sergeant in the Fugitive Apprehension Team, would it be fair to say that one of the first places you look for someone is at a home of a friend or family?
Yes.
Okay. So then would it be wise to not go somewhere where everybody knows who you are?
Sure.
Now, specifically to the days after well, first of all, do you recall the Oxford High School shooting on November the 30th of 2021?
I do.
Okay. And were you working at that point?
I was not working that day.
Okay. So you didn't respond to the shooting scene itself, would that be right?
That is correct.
But you were with the Fugitive Apprehension Team then?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the days the day or days after the shooting, were you asked to locate James and Jennifer Crumbley?
Yes,
And do you recall who tasked you with that assignment?
I believe Lieutenant Willis.
Okay. Tim Willis right here at the table?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when you were given that assignment?
I believe, not 100% positive, I believe it was like the 2nd of December.
Okay. So the shooting was Tuesday the 30th, Wednesday the 1st would be the following day, then Thursday the 2nd. You think around that day?
I believe it was that day.
Okay. Now, what information did you have at your disposal when you were tasked with this assignment?
We had their basic information and their address, things of that, vehicles that they drove, things of that nature.
Okay. So, were you aware that their personal cell phones have been seized?
I believe we were, yes.
Okay. Were you aware that they had obtained track phones?
I don't recall if I was aware of that initially. I believe we were, yes.
Okay, that's fair. So, what's the first thing you do when what is the first thing you did when you were tasked with this assignment?
Assigned the different members of my team to go out and check addresses, start looking for vehicles, start checking local hotels, things of that nature.
Okay, so when you say check addresses, what sort of addresses?
Family addresses, friends,
Okay.
the home address.
Now, did you or a member of your team, were you able to uncover information that they stayed at a hotel November the 30th, 2021?
I believe so, but the specifics of what hotel I don't recall.
Okay, that's fair. You said you had the James and Jennifer's vehicles identified at that point.
Correct.
Okay, were you made aware that a vehicle was located?
Yes.
Tell me about that, please.
That vehicle was located in the city of Auburn Hills
Where at in the city of Auburn Hills?
at an extended stay hotel,
Okay. And do you recall which day it was located?
December 2nd.
Correct. And what did you...
I misspoke, December 3rd.
Okay,
It's
December
located in
3rd.
the afternoon of December 3rd.
Okay. So when you received that information, what did you do?
I had everybody respond to that area to set up surveillance on that vehicle, check the hotel to see if they were still registered guests there.
Okay, and did you come to find out that they had been registered guests, but they left that morning?
Yes, I'm not sure the exact date they left, but it very well could have been in there.
Okay. It's fair to say that they left, and they left that vehicle there. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay. So did you have a team member sitting on that vehicle conducting surveillance?
Yes,
All right. Did they ever return to retrieve that vehicle?
no,
And do you recall the type of vehicle that was?
I do not.
If I said Kia, does that sound right to you?
That does sound right.
Okay. At that point in time, well, by that point in time, were you aware that they had obtained the track phones?
Yes,
Okay. Did you learn at that point in time that they had obtained another set of phones as well?
I don't believe I knew that.
Okay. So that would be new information to you.
Yes,
Now, at the time the Kia was found, you said it was the afternoon of December the 3rd. That would have been a Friday. You had detectives conducting surveillance?
correct.
Okay. And tell us what happened next, please.
Well, we sat and watched the vehicle all afternoon and all evening,
Of Friday the 3rd?
Friday the 3rd.
Okay.
And it was later in the evening of Friday the 3rd that I was made aware that their other vehicle had been located
And where was that located?
in the city of Detroit.
Okay. Now, prior to discovering that their other vehicle was located in the city of Detroit, were you aware that James and Jennifer Crumbley had been formally charged at noon on Friday the 3rd?
I was.
Okay. And what did you do with that information?
At that point, myself and one of the other detectives went to what we learned is their attorney's office and attempted to locate the vehicle that we had not found yet. And I spoke to their attorney.
Okay. And why did you do that?
Well, I wanted to make sure that she was aware that a warrant had been issued and introduce myself as the person that was looking for them and try to broker a safe, event-free surrender.
Okay. And were you able to do that?
I was not.
Did the defendant or her husband ever show up at that office?
Not the time we were there, no.
Okay. And that was Friday, December the 3rd. Do you recall approximately what time you went there?
Midday, noonish, around
Okay.
shortly after noon.
And how long was that meeting at Jennifer Crumbley's attorney's office?
5-10 minutes. We weren't there very long.
All right. What happened next?
We continued to do surveillance in the area in the event that they did show up back at the office. And then once the car was located, we responded to the first car being located.
Okay.
Extended stay.
So I take it the fugitive apprehension team doesn't just sit and wait when somebody doesn't show up at their attorney's office. So were other steps being taken?
Yes.
Tell me about that, please.
I had several other members of the team checking different addresses, checking hotels, all the things that we would normally do, continually looking.
Okay. And were you working with other law enforcement agencies at this point in time?
There were other law enforcement agencies that were offering their help, and they were actively looking in their areas as well.
Okay. And what agencies were those?
I believe the U.S. Marshals, the Border Patrol. I have received calls from the ATF. I know I believe the state police were looking, the Detroit police were looking. Everybody in the general area was looking for the vehicle that was still unaccounted for.
Okay. And is that something that typically happens in a fugitive situation?
Depends on the case. One of this magnitude, yes, that information would have been put out as be on the lookout for that vehicle.
Okay. So as the detective sergeant in the fugitive team, you were the one fielding these offers for assistance?
Yes.
Okay. So, sir, at this point in time, you have been tasked with this assignment by Lieutenant Willis. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, who do you apprise of progress in a fugitive situation?
In this particular case, I was apprising Lieutenant Willis and also Under Sheriff McCabe,
Okay.
who was calling me for regular updates.
And that's wholly a law enforcement function. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, as in the sheriff's office, or if the Border Patrol or FBI or ATF were working with you?
Yes.
Now, after you had the detective sitting in Auburn Hills, and after you had been conducting surveillance at Jennifer Crumbley's attorney's office, do you recall what city that was?
Bluefield Township, I believe.
Okay. What you said you were notified of the vehicle being found in Detroit.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall the approximate time that occurred?
I think it was close to 11 p.m., maybe shortly before 11 p.m.
Okay. And if I told you that the charges were formally read on noon on Friday the 3rd, would that sound correct?
Yes.
So tell me what happened when you received that information that another vehicle of the Crumleys was located in Detroit.
At that point, I instructed one of my detectives to maintain contact with the vehicle that we had found earlier in the day, and then I pulled everybody else, and we headed toward the address in Detroit.
Okay. When you say everybody else, were people doing different things in different locations?
Yes, I mean, several of the guys were right there on the car because that was the one thing that we knew we had. So
Okay.
we were sitting there. So yes, I pulled everybody off of that location and any other tasks that they were doing to head to Detroit.
Okay. What other tasks were other detectives doing if they weren't conducting surveillance?
Just searching records, looking for anything they could find that might lead us somewhere else.
Okay. How many members, if you can tell us approximately, are in the fugitive apprehension team?
At that time, I believe we had 7.
Okay. And were all 7 detectives assigned to this task?
Yes.
All right. Did you learn the address of the building where that second vehicle was found?
I did.
Okay. They said 1111 Bellevue Street, Detroit. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds correct.
Give us an idea of where that is in the city of Detroit.
It would be, I guess, on the east side of Detroit near Belle Isle, just a couple blocks in from Jefferson there, which is the main drag that runs along there.
Okay, so close, so we're oriented near the Detroit River?
Yes.
Okay. And what's at that location?
That is an industrial building that it was multiple floors and had multiple different suites or rooms in it.
Okay. Tell me your observation when you arrived at that location.
When we first arrived, the Detroit Police Department was there. They had the vehicle blocked off so nobody could get in or out of the parking lot. It was the only vehicle I recall being in the parking lot. And there were several Detroit officers on scene at that point.
And when you say several officers, are we talking about 5 or 6, or are we talking about more of that?
More than that.
Give us an idea of how many officers were on scene.
At that particular point, when we arrived there was probably 15, 20.
Okay. And did additional law enforcement personnel arrive as the night wore on?
They did.
Okay. And all told, could you give us an idea of how many police or federal agents were there on scene?
I'm guessing by the end of the night, there were probably around 100, I'm
Okay.
guessing.
And we say the end of the night, did the night end with the apprehension of the defendant?
It did as far as my team was concerned,
Okay.
yes.
So by that point in time, there were over 100 law enforcement personnel on scene.
I would estimate.
So you said you recalled being notified that the second vehicle was located in Detroit around 11 p.m. on Friday the 3rd?
I believe shortly before 11, but around 11, yeah.
Okay. Do you recall about what time you arrived there?
We got down there pretty quick that hour of night, probably 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. And so we're talking about 11:10, 11:15-ish, and I don't want to guess, so just tell me if that sounds right.
Or a little bit earlier.
Or a little bit early, okay. And there were already about 15 or so, at least, officers on scene?
Yes.
All right. So, once you arrived on scene, did you coordinate with other officers?
Yes, I talked to whoever was in charge, the sergeant or the lieutenant, I'm not sure what his rank was, of the
Okay.
Detroit Police Department that's there.
And then was a plan formed to search that industrial building?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
As more officers arrived, we were able to gain access to the building, and we kind of formulated a plan that several of us would search the second and I believe third floor of the building, and the Detroit Police Department was going to search, their SWAT team was going to search the first floor.
Okay. And sir, you've been a part of searches for fugitives in buildings in the past, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, give us an idea of what that looks like.
It's a very slow, methodical process. You slowly approach every door. You do your best to make sure that obviously no one gets hurt inside or outside. You make entry in, and then you search every place inside of the room you're in that could possibly hold an individual.
Okay. Is this a quiet endeavor, or is noise made?
It can be quite noisy.
Okay. And it's quite noisy the night of December the 3rd, 2021?
Yes, it was very noisy.
So you had, I think you said 7 detectives at your disposal in your particular team?
Yes.
Okay. And there were other teams conducting searches at the same time?
Yes.
So each team was searching different areas of the building, would that be right?
Yes, we searched, each team kind of was responsible for a certain floor of the building.
Okay. And were there police vehicles on the perimeter of this building?
Yes,
Okay. Could you give us an idea of how many police vehicles you saw?
dozens.
Now, sir, did you subsequently learn that an acquaintance of the defendant, Jennifer Crumbley, had a studio in that industrial building?
I learned that at some point, yes.
Okay. So you weren't involved in the actual apprehension of the defendant or her husband, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And tell us, if you know, how the apprehension occurred.
I believe that when the Detroit Police SWAT team searched that room, they were located inside of that room.
Okay. And do you recall the time that occurred where they were found?
Approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, I would think.
Okay, so
somewhere
that'd
in
be Saturday, December the 4th?
there. Yes.
After they were apprehended, were they turned over to you?
Yes.
Okay, and then what happened?
We myself and two other officers transported them directly back to the sheriff's office. They were in each of their vehicles and I was following.
Okay, and just so the record is clear, do you see Jennifer Crumbley in court today?
I do.
Can you please point to her, describe something she's wearing today?
Gray blazer.
Would the record reflect identification of defendant?
Record will reflect the accredited identification of the defendant.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, good morning. You have obviously a lot of experience with law enforcement, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In addition to your position where you're tasked with tracking down fugitives, you also have additional experience as a police officer who has arrested people in the past, correct?
Yes.
And there are different ways that a person accused of a crime can come into custody of the sheriff's department. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so if you see a crime take place, you can immediately go and arrest that person upon seeing a crime take place.
Yes.
You have the ability to go to the court, present facts, and ask the court to sign an arrest warrant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, if an arrest warrant is issued and outstanding, if a police officer were to pull someone over for a traffic stop that had a warrant, they could be taken into custody at that point.
Yes.
And that has happened before, where during a routine traffic stop, you see, oh my gosh, this person has a warrant, yes?
Yes.
It's also possible when warrants are issued that there are arrangements, and you're not a part of this. The defense attorney and the prosecutor can make arrangements for the defendant to turn themselves in to the court.
I can't speak to arrangements that would be made between the attorneys.
It's possible, though, for arrangements to be made that you're not a part of making, correct?
Yeah, I would have possibly, yes.
There are people who, when they have an outstanding arrest warrant, show up to the court to get what's called arraigned on the warrant.
Yes.
Now, you testified, and I think at one point you said you were sort of watching the vehicle, the Kia, on December 2nd. Was that incorrect, or was it December 3rd?
It was December 3rd.
Okay, so on December 3rd, you began watching the Kia that was in the hotel parking lot at what time?
Midday. I don't recall the exact time.
So you began watching the vehicle, the Kia, midday, and you never saw either of the Crumbleys return to that Kia, correct?
Correct.
It was midday on the 3rd that the prosecutor's office announced there was a warrant out for Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley.
Correct.
And on that day, you did not speak with Mr. or Mrs. Crumbley. They did not make any statements to you, correct?
Correct.
You testified that you stopped by an attorney's office. It's fair to say that was my office.
That's correct.
And we met very briefly, actually, in the hallway of my office.
Correct.
And during that meeting, I told you I am trying to make arrangements for my client with the prosecutor.
Judge, I have to object. Counsel can't be a lawyer and a witness. The court has talked about this as early as March of 2022.
Correct.
We have a
I'll
waiver
withdraw, I'm
right
sorry,
on point.
I'll withdraw the question. If there were any arrangements being made between a lawyer and the prosecutor, you're not aware of those arrangements, correct?
Correct.
Do you pay attention if the lawyer files an appearance with the court, letting the court know Mrs. Crumbley has a lawyer?
Not typically, no.
So you would not be aware if Mrs. Crumbley had officially hired a lawyer, and they filed an appearance saying, I'm representing Mrs. Crumbley?
Normally, no.
So that night, you testified that ultimately you ended up over in Detroit where the other vehicle of Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley was found.
Correct.
Now, when the other vehicle of Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley was found, you have no idea how that vehicle got to Detroit.
Correct.
You have no idea if Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley rode in the car together or if one of them drove that vehicle there.
Correct.
You also have no idea why they may have left a vehicle at the hotel in Auburn Hills, correct?
Correct.
And knowing that they stayed at a hotel in Auburn Hills, we can agree that Auburn Hills is close to this courthouse.
Correct.
Auburn Hills is located in between essentially this courthouse and Oxford. Is that a fair statement? And I don't know the geography real well, even though I live there.
You could say that.
Okay, so we know that one of their vehicles is local in Auburn Hills, correct?
Correct.
And the location in Detroit is less than an hour from here.
Correct.
Now, when you went to that building where Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were ultimately found, that building you described as an industrial building, correct?
Yes.
You testified that there are multiple suites within the building.
Yes.
And it's fair to say there are several businesses that operate out of that building.
Yes.
It is not an abandoned building.
No.
It is not an abandoned warehouse.
No.
So if there were ever comments made that Mrs. Crumbley was found in an abandoned warehouse, that was simply incorrect.
It was not an abandoned warehouse.
Correct. Your testimony was that at approximately 1 o'clock a.m. on the 4th, so later that night, that was specifically when Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were located in that building, correct?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, they were found in an art studio where a business had an operating art studio.
I'm not sure what actually was in the studio. I never actually entered the studio.
The portion of the building that Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were in was not some abandoned, barred up area of the building that was vacant.
Correct.
So there was a business or something going on in that studio. I just want to make it clear that it wasn't something that was abandoned, where no one was going or using over time prior to that day.
But I don't know what took place in that studio. I never entered that studio, but I do not believe it was an abandoned studio.
So they were ultimately apprehended around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Correct.
And do you have knowledge, and if you're not the right witness, please let me know, of what Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were doing when they were apprehended at 1 o'clock in the morning?
I have no idea. I was
Thank
not
you.
in the room.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Sir, the fugitive apprehension team, your function is to find the fugitive. Would that be right?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is a law enforcement function.
Yes.
Okay. And you were given your directives by Lieutenant Tim Willis of the Special Investigative Unit.
Yes, sir.
He's the officer in charge of this investigation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the rooms that you cleared, they weren't homes, apartments, or lofts, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, you may step down in your excuse.
Can we have a quick bathroom break?
Sure. About 10 minutes. Okay.
All right, for the jury.
I'm going to find out.
I'll let you know as soon as I know. I don't know, but I don't care. I don't care.
All right, 10 minutes. Who's the next witness?
This is lined up, so we have to see what's gonna.
Okay. All
May
right.
I please know which 4 witnesses are lined up so I can prepare my materials?
Give the whole list
We need
last
the
time.
whole.
Yeah, the whole list, right?
9 people.
So, I mean,
You've already done
There
2.
was an email of 9 people yesterday.
I agree,
Or
I'm just
4 this
asking
morning.
which 4 are on the hallway. This is not an unusual request.
The other
These are-
7 are lined up for today.
Okay. This is ridiculous. You don't hear you. Okay, thank you.
People versus Jennifer Crumbley, case number 22279-990-SH.
Ready for the jury?
Yes.
Yes, sir, thank you.
We'll bring them in.
All rise for the jury.
Maybe approach briefly, just about this witness.
All right. Next up, Miss Luke Kirkley. You know who's this? Oh, yeah. Good morning. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give you the truth to help you God?
Yes,
Where you can be seated? And then would you state the name and spell your first and last name?
sure. His name is Luke Kirtley, Lukekirtley.
You want to
Sorry.
place on,
Is it Kirtley?
Kirtley.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to place on the record that Mr. Kirtley doesn't mean any disrespect. He has sensitivity to his eyes, so he's been given permission to have his, to wear his hat.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the jury doesn't think he's being disrespectful. Okay. May I call you Luke?
Yes,
Okay. Good morning. How are you?
good. How are you?
Luke, can you tell the jury what your occupation is? What do you do for a living?
Sure. I own a company called Coffee House in Detroit, and so we manufacture and roast coffee and supply coffee to restaurants, hotels, and own a couple of cafes as well.
All right. And when did you start that business?
So I registered the business in about 2017, moved into Bellevue, I would say about 2 years after that. In our current spot, we were there since 2020.
Okay. Just briefly, what do you need space for in your business? What are you doing in your actual brick and mortar?
Sure. So as of current, we have two spaces in the building. One space is on the first floor, which is where we manufacture the coffee. So we import it, we bring it in on trucks. We do all the roasting there, and packaging, everything like that. And our offices are down there as well. And then on the third floor, we just have storage.
All right. And the address of that building is what?
1111 Bellevue Street.
All right. How long have you been a tenant there?
So I've been in the current space since 2020. Maybe a year before that, I was in another space on the third floor.
All right. Are there any conditions in your lease about what you can do with that building in terms of what you can use it for?
Definitely, yeah, I think there's general terms and conditions that you define within the lease, you know, to my knowledge, what I've seen.
Can you have a business that has people residing there overnight?
No, at least in my specific lease, you're not allowed to sleep there at all.
All right. Can you describe to the jury, aside from the address, about where that building is in Detroit?
Sure, so it's generally when people ask me where my office is, I tell them it's right across from Belle Isle. So, you know, Island in Detroit. We're about 2 blocks off of Jefferson, which is a pretty fairly main road, Jefferson and East Grand Boulevard. Specifically, this is Bellevue between Lafayette and St. Paul.
Okay. And about how many other tenants, if you know approximately, are in that building?
I would say in terms of leaseholders, maybe 10.
Okay. Is there anything else significant about that building with regard to storage? Is there parking?
Yeah, so in general, where you know, employees and tenants of the building are on the street, which is just free, open parking, and then there's 2 parking lots. There's, I don't know, north or south or east or west, but on one side of the building there's a parking lot which is gated, you know, you have like a little clicker to get in, and then on the other side there's a strip of guest parking that they identify, and then the same thing, kind of like a remote sliding gate.
And so who has the fob or the remote to get into the parking lot?
Tenants.
Okay. Is there any indoor parking or garage?
So there are indoor garages. There's a couple different spots. There's one side of the building if we're looking at the front of the building on the left, there's essentially like an empty part of the building that hasn't been developed yet, that they store like a truck when they spread salt and whatnot. That sits in there. And then the main garage door, which tenants use actively to go in and out of for loading and unloading.
Okay.
And then on the first floor, there's an elevator that you can drive a car onto and go up and down through the floors.
Okay. And what would be the reason you need a car elevator?
So the building was for like car manufacturing in the 20s.
Okay.
It was there. It's the original elevator from when the building was built. But tenants like myself and a woodworking company on the second floor will use it to move cars up and down, load, unload, generally.
All right. So in addition to your coffee roasting business, you have another hobby, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And what is that? Tell the jury what it is.
Yeah, so I like to drive cars. So I cycle through, sell, buy cars just to enjoy. And so presumably where you're getting at is on the third floor. I put cars up there every now and then. We have one of the storage units has a garage door ourselves, so we can pull a car in there.
So at any given time, how many cars do you have personally?
2 or 3.
Okay. I want to take you back to November 30th of 2021. How many cars did you own at that time, if you can remember?
I believe 2. It might have been 3, but as far as I know, it wasn't that many.
All right. And did you have a reason, that was a Tuesday, did you work that day during the day?
Yes.
And about what time did you leave?
Not sure exactly. Being a business owner, I work really random hours, so sometimes late, sometimes early, but generally speaking, I get off around 6-ish.
Okay. Talk to me about activity. Have you been there at night past 10 o'clock before?
Yeah.
What's the building occupied around that time? Do you have people that are still in the building working?
Very rarely. So there's one tenant to my left, which is like a breed rare plants, to my knowledge. They are intermittently there late. It's not a pattern, I would say, if anything, so they're just kind of there. And then there's a vinyl sign company as well. The owner's often there late, but I wouldn't say he makes like a particular habit of being there at a certain time. But generally speaking, when I go there to like switch cars around or anything, it's empty.
Okay, let's back up. The switching car things. Explain to the jury what you mean.
So at the time, I lived down the street, more or less, less than a mile away. And where I would park my car, I found it as a liability to park one of the cars there because it was like a nicer, lower mile car, because my other one had its mirror taken off. on the street that I park on. So when I have when people refer to it as like a daily driver, that's what I let sit at the building while I, went and enjoyed my other car.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I can't personally relate to that, but I understand.
when it was time to put it away, I went and got my worst car generally, and went to go park down on the street. And so I
A
took the car.
beater, you have a beater?
Yes,
I
a
don't-
beater.
really
Exactly
call it a
right.
beater.
You should have seen the oil that came out of that thing. Anyways, so yeah, I had a beater, you could say. And then the other one was a little nicer, and I had plans to sell it, so I put it at the office to avoid, something like that happening.
Okay, so you decided to go take that car and basically switch cars.
That's correct.
And you did that at what time, if you remember?
Around 10 p.m., I would say.
Okay. Did you live with anybody at the time?
My girlfriend.
Okay.
So now fiance, she's nice, but she's always like, "Oh, it's so late, just leave it, it's fine." But I'm just always like obsessed. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna switch it really quick."
Because you didn't want anything to happen to it.
Correct.
Okay. So when you went to the building around 10 o'clock that night,
Mhm.
what, if anything, did you know about Jennifer Crumbley?
So obviously I was relatively in tune with what had happened at the school. So I knew of that news, and I had heard through Facebook. I don't know what or who posted it, but it was some type of poster, that was like, "Hey, this is like the car, this is like the situation," everything like that.
What was on the poster?
The car and the license plate, and presumably any photos or anything like that.
Okay, so I need you to kind of be specific when you
Yes.
say the car and photos. Were there any people pictured in the photos?
I believe so.
And do you know who that was?
It was the two parents.
Okay, the Crumbleys.
Mhm.
All right. And then there were pictures of cars?
Yeah, there was a picture of, it was like a stock photo of a Kia, and it was a newer Kia that I'd never seen before. So I kind of remember that, and then there was a license plate as well.
Okay. What did the poster say? Were there any words?
Yeah, I mean, I assume it, years ago at the time, but I assume it would have said wanted, and then additional information about the whereabouts, anything like that. But
Okay.
just really, to my knowledge, all I really remember is the car
The
and
key.
the license plate.
Okay. All right, so tell the jury what happened as you approached the building. What's the first thing you did? You have to use the clicker?
Yeah, so I used the clicker, and I don't know how far you want me to go, but I used the clicker, pulled my car into the parking lot where I normally park my car, and then at the time I noticed a car was parked in the back corner of the lot, tucked away, but I didn't really pay any mind to it. We have cars, many tenants in the building with different cars, and employees leave cars every now and then. But I feel like I'm pretty in tune with who keeps their cars there and just generally observant. And so I saw the car, didn't really think much of it, went inside to my office, and then when I walked back out of the door, that's kind of when I was in line of sight of the front of the car, and that's when.
Okay, so the car wasn't,
Yeah.
the car was in, was backed in, or was it parked front first?
No, so it was backed into the furthest corner of the lot.
Okay. Were there any other cars in the lot?
There may have been one car in there that wasn't my own, but I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if that's it, but I do know there's one car that generally sits there.
Was it the closest spot to the building or the furthest away?
It was so if you're standing in the front of the building, it was the furthest spot you could park possible.
And I'm sorry, I said November 30th, and I apologize. It wasn't November 30th. I was asking, did you know what happened on November 30th?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
What was the day, though, that you went to the, at 10 o'clock to switch the cars?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Whatever day.
Was it a Friday?
I'm not.
Okay,
100% positive.
if I told you it was December 3rd, do you have reason to believe that was incorrect?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I remember it being very cold out.
Okay,
So,
okay. Thank you, Mr. Keys, for reminding me of that. So you came back out and you saw, did you say you saw the car again?
yeah, so when I opened the door, the side door of the building and walked out, I was met more in the line of sight with the front of the car, so it was back into the spot.
And what did you think, if anything?
Really, I just thought it looked a little familiar, and it you know, rung a bell. It was the car that I saw on the poster.
How soon in time to the wanted poster, as you describe it, did you see that car?
It was the same day.
Okay. All right, so what did you do next?
So I saw the car, but obviously it was back in, so I didn't see the plate, which I thought was peculiar, just because it was a newer car and I hadn't seen it before. So I pulled up on my phone the poster, I found it.
Hold on.
And
I think you're hearing people next door.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so you pulled up the poster on your phone.
so I found the poster, and I was doing this as I was walking to the car. And by the time I had the poster up, I turned my flashlight on and walked around the back of the car, on the driver's side to the back, and then obviously put two and two together that was the plate that was on the poster.
So the license plate, did the license plate match what was on the poster or
Yes. Mm-hmm.
not? Okay, and then what happened?
And then so I looked over and saw somebody sitting next to the car on a curb. So there's like a general curb. Saw somebody sitting there.
On the driver's side?
On the passenger side, rear passenger side, there's like an elevated curb that you could sit on. It's probably 2 feet tall.
Okay.
And somebody was sitting there, put up in like a blue plaid hoodie. And I wasn't like,
Did you say anything?
I didn't say anything.
As you approach the car and it's facing you, correct, the front of it?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see any figure on the passenger side wheel? Okay.
No, it was also dark.
Okay. Was there a line of sight? For instance, when you turned around and you, from the back of the passenger, could you see in front of you, or was there something obstructing that?
No, it was a pretty clear, straight shot. As to whether or not we would have been able to make eye contact in theory, I'm not 100% positive,
Okay.
just based off of like the angle of where the door and the car is.
Would it be, if you were standing where that person was sitting, would you have been able to see somebody approaching the car?
If I was standing, then yes. If I was sitting, I'm not 100% positive.
Okay, so did that figure in the hoodie move?
No.
Did that individual turn around and respond to your flashlight?
No.
Did that individual say anything?
No.
Did you notice anything else? Do you know what the individual was doing?
No.
Okay. What did you do next?
Turned my flashlight off and very calmly walked back into the building as if I didn't see anybody.
Why did you do that?
Because I assumed after connecting that it was the plate, that it was somebody related to the incident.
Okay. And how are you feeling in that moment?
Quite tense. I remember specifically putting the plate 2 and 2 together. It's like, that's a feeling you've never felt before.
Okay.
But so then I walked back into my office, and I locked all the doors, and then.
Were you afraid?
I would say so. Yeah, I wasn't aware of. I mean, it was a lot of emotions were going on at the time.
Okay. Is the building equipped with a CCTV?
As far as I know, they have cameras, and they've used them before. In other, there was a theft in that building once.
Okay, so are you aware where the cameras are placed?
Generally.
Okay.
And there's one in the parking lot that we're talking about right now, and then there's a few in I would consider like the main promenade of the building inside.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to view that footage in the night? At that night?
No, I have not.
Okay. Your Honor, it is People's 344.
Their phone. Oh, he dropped his phone.
Okay.
Your Honor, the defense stipulates to the admission of 344.
Thank you. All right. If you can see on your monitor there, we're gonna. What are we looking at?
Okay, so this is a camera from the rear of the building. I actually didn't know that we had a camera here.
Okay.
There's another camera, which in this there's that trash like kind of receptacle back there in the top right corner.
Okay.
There's another camera there.
All right. So What's up on the right corner, top of the page? What is that?
That's like a dumpster.
Okay.
So it's like a removable dumpster.
And where, in relation to this photo, would the entrance or exit be?
Right to the left of it. So if you are looking generally, like, yeah, that is the gate to pull into.
Okay. So this is looking at the building.
This is on the building. The
Okay.
camera itself looking away from the building.
So that's where what we just pointed to is where you would enter the parking lot,
Correct.
where the clicker.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the actual door is, to the right here. Yeah, right over there.
Okay. Okay. For the record, Your Honor, the timestamp is 22 minutes off. It seems to be a running theme with all surveillance. So that would be what time of? One moment, Your Honor.
Isn't this 10:56? It's not 10:56.
The stamp on the screen is 22 minutes fast than actual time.
Okay. We're going to establish the time of the 911 call, which might help put this in better perspective. At some point, you called 911, correct?
Yes.
Was it, how long of a time period was it from seeing the individual and recognizing it was the same car to calling 911?
Maybe a minute or two.
Okay. So your call to 911 was around 10:43 that night.
Okay.
You just a few minutes before that, is that correct?
Definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
I went right into my office and called them immediately.
Okay. And so okay. So I believe that's around 10:34 that this footage is from, but we can clear that up, and we're going to play that. And who is that, if you know, Luke?
One of them, presumably. I'm not 100% positive.
Is that your car at the top?
I believe so. That would make sense.
All right, well, we'll wait till
Yeah,
you're...
we'll wait until I pull it in and I'll definitely be able to know. Yeah, so that's the BMW that I have.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And your spot, that parking spot, is that, how close to the entrance of the building is it?
I'm parked right next to the door.
Okay. And the place where you saw this Kia and we saw an individual walking towards the left, where would that car, like we can't see it, but where would it be parked in relation to this screen?
So, where is their car?
Yes.
In the bottom left, right there.
Okay. So at the top, do you see can you tell the jury what you're doing?
Going into the building, looks like.
Okay.
You can see me look over at the car, too, right there for the first time. Also, just for the record, I don't know if this is my BMW or the Volkswagen, but I know I had those two at the time. And they both have roof racks, unfortunately.
Okay. When you enter the building, then do you have to go into another door to get to your unit?
Yeah, I have to go through just my main office door.
Okay, so can you tell the jury what you're doing right there?
So this is where I'm walking over to check that plate.
And what do you have in your hand?
My phone. I've never seen this too.
tell the jury what you're doing now?
Playing it cool, as they would say.
Okay, playing it cool.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you
He said he was playing it cool. And what do you see there?
So this obviously I didn't know of or see at the time, but the person that I saw going into the building looks like
Almost right after you.
directly after, yeah.
Did you see that person when you?
I must have been in my unit at the time because I did not know anybody came into the building after.
Okay. Did you know until now that happened?
I did know that I put it together that they got into the building somehow.
Okay. Okay, so there's a car at the top entering the parking lot. How long did you stay in your unit?
Until they arrived, and then I came out of the front of the building.
Okay.
Which my door, the front door to my entrance is like right where they are, basically. Because this whole wall on the right side, all of those are, that's my whole unit.
Okay.
From basically, I would say the end of the other unit, you know, the artist's unit, all the way down to the corner of the building.
Okay, it might be a good time to talk about that. Do you know a person whose last name is Sikora?
Yes.
All right, how do you know him?
I know he's a tenant in the building.
Have you ever spent time talking to him? Are you friends?
No, we've waved to each other before,
Okay.
but more than that, nothing. I didn't know anything about him, and that was the extent of our relationship.
Okay, and did you ever, around this time, was there anything significant about the hallway on the first floor? Was there anything left there?
So tenants will leave things every now and then. At the time, there was in the central promenade, which is like generally where people pull in the elevator and whatnot, there was a mattress sitting there.
Can you describe the mattress?
It was a white mattress. I think it had like an orange stripe on it. Not positive, but I think it was a Tempur-Pedic as well.
Okay. Was that normal to have a mattress just hanging out in the promenade? Okay. How long was it there?
A few days, maybe a week. Could have been there longer. I know it was there long enough for somebody to put a note on it and to ask if it was like being thrown out, and if they could buy it or use it or something. But somebody put a note on it at some point.
All right. And when you walked back into the building that night, at some point did you notice that that mattress was no longer in that promenade area?
I probably didn't pay any particular mind to it, but it wasn't there.
The next day?
Yeah.
Did you notice that, or that night, or?
Well, I assume I could have noticed at the time, but I don't recall if I particularly remember if the mattress was there. Obviously, my mind was on something else at this point.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm going to play for you. At some point, you called 911. You
Yes.
said. Okay. I'm going to play for you the 911 call. You have listened to that before.
Yes.
Okay. It's Exhibit 345. I'm not sure if there's an objection to it.
I'm sorry, we stipulate to the admission of 345.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to play.
Call on Friday, December 3rd, 2021, 10:43 and 14 seconds p.m.
District 911, what is the address of the emergency?
1111 Bellevue Street.
Repeat the address of your station.
1111 Bellevue Street.
What's the far across street?
Lafayette and Bellevue.
Tell me exactly what happened.
The people the parents of the shooter that are running away, they're here.
Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to. You have to be more specific. Tell me exactly what happened at the location. What's going on now?
Okay, so the Oakland shooter, the kid, has the two parents that are on the run right now, and it says, Oakland County said, call if you see anything. And I just went to go park my car and switch it around at my office, and there was a Kia that looked like their car, and I walked around and checked their license plate, and it's their car, and the woman is here, and that's next to the car.
The woman is where?
Sitting next to her car in the parking lot.
She's sitting next to her vehicle on the ground or in another vehicle?
On the ground. On the ground.
Okay, and what kind of vehicle is this, sir?
It's a 2021 Kia, the black Kia SUV, in the parking lot.
Was anyone inside of the vehicle?
I don't know.
You said you walked around the vehicle and looked inside. You didn't?
I walked back to look at the license plate because I saw online that that car was backing.
Do you have the plate number?
1 second. It's DQG 5203.
Repeat that plate for me.
DQG 5203.
Okay. And the vehicle was parked in a parking lot and the mother is
Yes. I have it next to my car in the parking lot. I'm inside my office now.
and the mother is sitting on the ground. What is she wearing?
Yes. She's wearing a hoodie, but I don't know what kind.
What color is the hoodie?
I don't know. I think it was plaid, but I saw her first glimpse and then I ran inside because I like my car.
So you're not sure what color the hoodie was, but you seen her sitting there?
Yes.
Okay, so what's your name?
Luke.
Okay, well, we're seeing this in that area. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I can't believe it. They're here.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to stay on or am I?
No, sir, you're fine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, they're here. It's crazy, but that's who the people are looking for.
Okay, so there we go. Sure, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so that is the 911 call, you
Yeah.
made, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And where were you when you made that call?
So I was sitting in the corner of my office, which at the time was a great spot because it was kind of hidden away. It was
So you
kind
were
of
hiding?
more or less. I just I really didn't know what was going to go on, so I sat in the back corner where we kind of like inventory all of our green coffee, unroasted coffee, which shares a wall with the unit next door. So
The art studio?
yes.
Okay.
And at the time, that was the most secure spot, but obviously
Okay.
the next room over.
All right. Are there windows on your unit that look out to the parking lot on the first
Yeah, many.
All right. Are there windows in the art studio that look out to the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay. How soon after you made that call did you hear sounds of law enforcement?
Well, I saw the lights through the window, and that's when I came out. 5-ish minutes.
All right. How many cars approached?
It wasn't many. It was like 1 or 2.
All right. And what did you do?
I met them out there, and basically gave them the lowdown. Said the car in the corner is the one, and then I let them into the building, and they went because you can only access. I didn't have my fob, obviously, that was sitting in, or the garage opener that was sitting in the car. So opened the door for them. Then they went out the side door, verified the plate, and then a lot more people showed up.
Okay. Talk to me. Tell the jury about that.
So maybe 5 minutes after they personally identified that was the car that they were looking for. I mean, it must have been 20 or 30 officers at that time.
Lights and sirens?
Oh yeah, don't know if the sirens were on particularly, but lights were on for sure. I mean, people came like locked and loaded. There were a lot of guns.
All right, locked and loaded. What does that mean to you? Can you describe that to the jury?
The officers who were inside of the building had full-on rifles, walking through the space.
Vests?
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
Do you remember what it said on their vest?
No, but I know U.S. Marshals were there
Okay.
at some time
And how do you know that?
because they told me.
All right. The people you spoke to, though, what law enforcement agency at the first 2 or 3 cars that
I
are?
assume they were.
Okay. At some point, did you go back into your unit?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
That night? When was it?
Sometime between now and there was a time where an officer took me to like a central command center area that they set up a couple blocks away. But they told me to hang out in the office sometimes. I sat there for a little bit, I stepped outside for a little bit, generally kind of like floating between outside and,
Okay, when you were in your unit, could you hear any sounds?
Yeah, generally I can hear quite a bit. It's just the windows, half of the walls are just windows.
Okay,
And then all the walls, it's just 2 pieces of drywall, no insulation. So generally, you can hear that people are in the building.
all right, and that evening, did you see any searches conducted?
Yes.
All right, and was there one officer or more than one? How many were in the building, if you know?
10.
Okay, and were they silent or were they talking?
No, they were talking.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
so they were making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Okay, and you, at that time, did you have any idea where this individual was by the car?
No. So they asked me. I didn't think they were at all involved in entering the building or not. I would have thought that they, because they just asked me what I think, and I was like, they definitely would have taken off.
Okay,
So they had, essentially a perimeter. I was standing with an officer, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like we're scouting out the surroundings and whatnot." So at the time, if you would have asked me if they were in the building, I would have told you 100% no way.
but you didn't see them go anywhere?
Nope.
You just thought they would be running?
Yeah, I didn't think there was a situation where they would have been able to access the building without the fob.
I see. At some point, the Crumbleys were apprehended. Were you there?
I was at the command center thing that I described earlier at the time.
Okay, so did you observe searches just in the house, or were you aware that there was searching going on in the area?
No, I was just aware that there were searches going on in the office building.
Okay, and did you return to your office that night?
Well, I had to get my car. I don't know if I entered my office afterwards.
Okay.
Oh wait, I did walk into the office because I was walking with officers.
All right, do you know if that was before or after they were apprehended?
That was after. I was not there during the apprehension. One of the officers, when we were sitting at the command center, was like, "Here they go," and then took me to the office.
And did you recognize anything about either one of the individuals?
I never saw the individuals.
Okay.
I only saw a car, a squad car leave.
Okay, I appreciate that. Do you remember what time that was, or when you arrived home that night?
Late, maybe 2 or 3 a.m.
In the morning?
It was a couple hours, yes.
Okay. At some point, did that mattress reappear?
Yes. So afterwards, I don't know if it was the same day or the following day, but the mattress was back into the hallway, and there was a bit of a tangle as to what happened with it after. Somebody had placed it in front of the artist's door at a time, and then it got moved back to the center and kind of went back and forth because I don't know whose it was, but I assumed they didn't want it after what had happened. So I don't know where it is now, but it was generally floating around the office building for a couple days afterwards.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Cross.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Shannon. I'm gonna ask you some questions. If I confuse you in any way or ask a bad question, can you please let me know?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go back. You're a tenant in the building. Your business is in that building, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there are other businesses in that building.
Yes.
It is not in any way, shape, or form an abandoned building.
That's correct.
Now, you were testifying about how you have cars that you store in the building. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, the court has to make a clear record of yes
Sure.
or no, so they can't record mm-hms, but
Okay.
I knew it.
Yes.
Okay, so you have cars that you don't want people to see that occasionally you have over at your place of business, correct?
That's correct.
So at night, if you have a nice car, you actually put it into the building so that people out in the parking lot can't just see it out and about.
Yes, though I would say I'm very particular about my cars. I would say that generally, people don't think like that.
Okay, but if you're thinking like that and you want to make sure people don't see your cars,
Mhm.
you know if you put them in the building, they're safer.
That's correct. It's in my, my unit specifically, so I have a garaged unit, that I pull the car into because technically it's still in public view, by the other tenants if I were to just park the car. And we aren't allowed to park our car in this space generally. I only use it for my specific unit.
Okay, I see. And on that date, it's fair to say no one asks you, hey, can somebody put their car in your private space in the building, correct?
Correct.
Now, you testified that when you saw the person out in the parking lot, they were sitting outside of their car. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you even walked over with your flashlight,
Mhm.
that person didn't get up and run away, anything like that, correct?
Correct.
Could you tell what that person was doing?
No. Just
If I-
sitting.
If I told you they were smoking cigarettes, do you recall seeing that?
No.
So they stayed sitting even when they saw you with the flashlight out there.
That's correct.
And after they saw you with the flashlight, we saw in the video, you went back in playing it cool, correct?
Yes.
And that person appears to have walked back into the building as well.
Yes.
You weren't aware that they walked back in the building, but we can see now on the tape that that's what happened.
Correct.
And you testified that when you could see the person out by the car, they could also see you, correct?
Not particularly. If they were sitting behind the car, like I mentioned, there's a chance they couldn't have met direct eye contact with me coming out of the building.
So they may have seen you or may not have.
Correct.
Now, you testified too that when this was all unfolding, you put yourself in the most secure spot in your space, in your tenant space, correct?
Yes.
You went into your office and felt like you needed to hide out in the most safe place you could find.
I wanted to be as far away from my doors as possible, given the instance somebody perhaps would enter or hear me or anything.
And from what you knew about this case, there is this statewide manhunt for Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley.
That's correct.
And from what you knew, it appeared that law enforcement, the marshals, the border patrol, sheriff's department, law enforcement around the state are looking for the Crumbleys, correct?
I would say my extent of who was looking for them was only to the actual poster that I saw.
Okay.
I wasn't particularly familiar with the gravity of the situation.
You were familiar that it was important though, because when you saw them, you obviously knew, I need to call 911 and
That's
make
correct.
sure to report this.
Yes.
And if anything, you were shocked that you ended up seeing their vehicle at your place of business.
Yes.
Now, when you saw people coming, you testified that a lot of law enforcement came in with lots of guns. Is that correct?
After identifying the car.
After identifying the car,
Firstly, just an officer or two showed up.
okay, so an officer or two showed up. Did they have guns?
No,
Okay, when
I mean,
when were there lots of
I
guns?
assume they did have a handgun,
Yeah.
as officers do. Though I wouldn't see the arrival of people with any rifles or anything like that until after that was confirmed.
Okay, so after law enforcement got there is when you see law enforcement coming in with rifles, guns, vests, things like that.
Yes.
Now, the cameras you testified about on the outside of the building, there was one camera that you said, oh, I didn't even know we had a camera there. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes.
There are many other cameras on the outside of the building that are visible to anyone in the parking lot, correct?
Yes, I would say they're not, out there like you would be like, oh, look at those cameras. But there are cameras there. If you look around, you'll find them.
So if you're in the parking lot and you look at the building, you can see that there's different cameras on the building.
Yes.
And there's a number of cameras on the building.
There are, so including this one, there are two on that side of the parking lot, two small white cameras, and then perhaps one on the front I don't know if there are any other outside of the building. To my knowledge, that's the extent of the cameras that I know.
You testified that there was no way you could imagine you were pretty much 100% sure to yourself that Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley, while they may have been there, were not in the building, correct?
That's correct.
And you testified you would have thought they would have taken off and run, correct?
Correct.
If they were smarter criminals, they would have taken off and run.
Your Honor, I'm not sure she wants me to answer that, but it's not an appropriate question. He doesn't know how smart of criminals
Excuse me,
they
I'm
were.
going to just withdraw the question.
Okay, well, that would cause him to speculate.
So obviously you reported all of that. That's the extent of your involvement in the case, the 911 tape, correct?
Yes.
And then you've worked with the prosecutor to prepare for your testimony today.
More or less.
Okay. I have no other further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Briefly, we met one time at the office, is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And I asked you what happened?
Yes.
Okay. Were you, when you were hiding in your office, but in that corner,
Mm-hmm.
were you hiding from law enforcement?
No.
Who were you hiding from?
Well, so I sat in that corner specifically because I thought it was the most far away from the windows. In the instance somebody would hear something out there, or if something really bad were to happen, you know, if somebody was armed or something, could have shot through a window.
But when you saw law enforcement,
I was already outside right when law enforcement arrived.
right, so you weren't afraid of the law enforcement?
No.
Okay, thank you. And you be excused, Your Honor?
Yes, you can step down.
Thank you.
Please, next witness.
We have Corporal David Shaw in the hallway.
Corporal David Shaw. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about you is the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please step up and have a seat? And then would you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
My name is David Shaw, S-H-A-W. First name is David, D-A-V-I-D.
Go ahead, prosecutor.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to speak really as loud as you can, okay? Okay. How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Detroit Police Department.
Okay, and what do you do there?
I'm assigned to the Special Response Team, which is the city's SWAT team.
The SWAT team?
Yep.
Okay. How long have you been a police officer?
For 13 years,
And what's your rank right now?
corporal.
Corporal. Okay, so I'm not familiar with Detroit Police and their ranking structure. Tell me what that means.
So corporal is essentially like would be a field training officer or a trainer of other police officers. That's essentially it.
Okay. And how long have you been assigned to the City of Detroit Special Response Team?
For approximately 10 years.
10 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And where did you work prior to that?
Worked on Eastern District,
What-
which is like a Gunston and Gratiot.
Okay, so would that be a patrol officer?
Correct.
Okay. So tell the jury, please, what are some of the responsibilities of a member of the Detroit Police Special Response Team?
The Special Response Team serves high-risk search warrants, usually for homicide suspects or dangerous people, and then we also do barricaded gunmen, so get domestic violence and someone barricaded in a house. They don't want to come out, police officers will call us and we respond to that scene.
Okay. So you've had specific training when it comes to executing search warrants and arrest warrants?
Correct.
Okay. So how many, we would call this a raid. Would that be right? Fair?
That's fair.
Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Okay. So how many times have you executed either a search warrant or an arrest warrant?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I mean,
Give us the ballpark if you can.
probably hundreds. I know I have 173 barricaded gunmen instances I've dealt with.
173 barricaded gunmen alone?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and then on top of that, the search warrants, I don't keep track of that off the top of my head, but I would say more than 200. easily.
Okay. So you've been doing this for about a decade?
Correct.
And is this the routine practice of the Detroit Police Special Response Team?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to direct your attention to Friday, December the 3rd, 2021, approximately 11:30 p.m.
Okay.
Do you recall that date and time?
I do.
Okay. And did you have occasion to be recalled to 1111 Bellevue in the city of Detroit?
Yep. Got recalled for a search for a wanted fugitive. That was the recall we got. So that was the only information I got prior to getting there.
Okay. Now, when I say recall, what does that mean?
So our commander will call our lieutenant, who then texts our sergeants, and they send out a text message to our whole team that says, "Come back to the base or respond to this particular address." In this case, it was respond to this area. And once I got there, it was given more information at that time.
Okay. So I take it 11:30 at night on that Friday night, you weren't in the office itself. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that was accurate.
Okay. So when you're recalled, you're always on call, but you're called to duty?
Correct.
Okay. So as a member of the special response team, is it fair to say that you're always on call?
I'm always on call. Yeah.
Always on call. Okay. So approximately what time did you arrive at that location?
I'm usually pretty quick. That's roughly 20 minutes from my house, maybe 25 minutes before I got to that scene.
Okay. So if you got the message about 11:30, would it be fair to say you arrived before midnight?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now what type of building is at that location?
There's a large, I want to call it maybe an industrial type building.
If I showed you some pictures, would that help?
Yeah.
So we have people's 348, 349, and 351 for this witness.
348 through 351.
349 and 351.
We have no objection to those.
Right, 348. So 348, 349,
And 351.
351, not 350.
Correct. That's who this witness. Sir, on the screen in front of you, can you see the People's Admitted Exhibit 348?
I do.
Okay. And what am I looking at in this photograph here?
It looks like an industrial building to me.
Okay, so this is the address 1111 Bellevue in the city of Detroit? Is that a yes?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. And this is, I'm sorry. This is People's Admitted 349. This is the same building?
Looks to be, yes, sir.
Okay. And this is People's 351. Again, photograph of 1111 Bellevue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you arrived, sir, tell me what you saw, your initial observations.
There's a ton of police cars. Initially, with this particular incident, there wasn't anywhere to set up on like a barricade government would be, so I kind of waited until we had more officers show up to the scene prior to making entry into the building.
Okay. So let me stop you right there. You said a ton of officers are already in scene. Was that your team members or
No,
other officers?
There was other people. So there's, I couldn't tell you what agencies or what units were there, but it was more than just SRT.
Okay, so it's more than Detroit Police Special Response. Was it also, excuse me, more than just Detroit police officers as well?
To be honest, I couldn't tell you. I didn't see any other city cars, but there was a lot of Detroit police cars, and then as we started showing up, this was prior to making entry. Once we were in the building, there was multiple agencies, multiple tactical teams, or at least one other tactical team that we ended up running into while we were clearing.
Okay. So, sir, tell me, you arrived a little before midnight, you said, and at that point, were your team members already there?
No, I was the first one there. I talked with I believe the commander or lieutenant that was on the scene already. He kind of gave me a rundown of what was going on, and we kind of formed a plan and waited for all the guys to get there before he made entry to this building.
So you were recalled from your home, you said?
Correct.
Okay. Were you wearing the uniform you're wearing today?
No, sir.
Tell me what you were wearing.
It's essentially an unmarked uniform, but it's a black tactical shirt, which allows me to apply patches to each shoulder, so I'm able to identify myself as a Detroit police officer. Then I have a heavy vest on that says police across the chest.
Heavy vest is what?
It's a bulletproof ballistic vest.
Okay.
With heavy plates on the inside for protection from firearms. Helmet, usually a mask. At this time it's pretty cold, so I usually do wear a face covering. Also have my badge on, my rig that I use for my gun belt, and that's essentially it. Everything's all black though, except for the police and white lettering across the
Okay,
chest.
and that's the standard uniform Detroit Police Special Response Team?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So once you met with the other team members and a plan was organized, what happened next?
We actually made entry into this building where there was a ton of officers there already.
Give us an idea of how many.
On the main floor, when we first went through the front door, there was, say, roughly 20 people in there, just in the initial spot.
Just in the main entryway?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there were officers that were dressed kind of plain clothes. Some guys that maybe they're dressed like DFAT, which would be like jeans and a shirt, but a vest that identifies them as police.
What's DFAT?
The Detroit's Fugitive Apprehension Team.
Okay.
And there was other, like I said, other officers there that looked to be like a tactical team.
Okay. So you weren't the only special response team on the scene?
I wouldn't say no.
All right. And we've already heard testimony that this building had 3 floors to it. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. So tell us, sir, what is the first thing that the Detroit Police Department Special Response Team did?
So after making entry, we started searching the main floor kind of slowly. I know we did breach 1 or 2 doors on the initial entry. There's a room right to our right when we went into the door. We had to breach a double door. We breached that one, and
Let me stop you right there. Breach, what does that mean?
we used a ram, and a manual breach is you're breaking the door open, you're defeating the locking mechanism.
Okay.
And that's what we did.
So that was on the first floor of this building?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so who used the ram? Was it you or another member?
It was another member.
Okay. So describe to us what happens when you use the breach to defeat a locking mechanism.
You're essentially banging a 35-pound metal ram against the door until it opens.
Until it opens? Okay.
Yeah.
And were you able to breach that door in this particular instance?
Yes.
Okay. And what was found in that room, if you recall?
Nothing. It actually ended up wrapping around to another door. We ended up going out that door and back into the hallway that we were in, but we had cleared that room and the conjoining room before we went back out to the hallway.
Okay. Now, at some point, was Detroit Police Department's Special Response Team coordinating with other tactical units on scene?
I believe my commander was, or my sergeant. I was not personally.
That's fair.
But I couldn't. I would assume they were.
Okay. So just walk us through then where your particular team went that evening.
We started on the main floor, and we were given information that the 2 wanted fugitives went up to the 2nd floor and never returned back downstairs. So that kind of forced our way. That kind of pushed us to the 2nd floor.
Were other officers on the 2nd floor already?
Correct. Yes, and that's when we ran into that 2nd tactical team who said they had cleared the 2nd floor. They cleared all the open doors.
Okay.
So we ended up clearing the closed doors as much as we could. At some point, somebody gained access to a ring of keys, and we were opening the closed door, locked doors with the keys.
Okay. Now, at this point in time, when the tactical units were inside the building, were there other police officers on the exterior of the building?
Yeah, there was police everywhere. I would assume. I'd be guessing at this point, but I would bet there was police on the perimeter of the building. Yes.
Okay. And you said police everywhere?
Yeah.
Were there emergency lights activated in vehicles?
I'm not 100% sure with that.
That's okay. Was it just the tactical units then inside the building at this point?
There was canine officers as well.
Canine as well?
We utilized canine officers a canine officer on the 2nd floor who checked each door prior to us opening it with the dog, and we never obviously got any hits from the dog on the 2nd floor.
Okay. And to your knowledge, were there other teams on the 3rd floor at this point in time as well?
I'm not 100% sure.
That's fair. Where did you go after the 2nd floor was cleared?
If I'm not mistaken, I think we went up to the 3rd floor before returning back down to the main floor.
Okay. So at some point in time, you and your team returned back to the 1st floor?
Correct.
Okay. And why did you do that?
At some point, one of my supervisors was given information that the room the wanted fugitives were supposed to be in was on the 1st floor. At some point, someone asked if it had already been cleared, and which they said no. So, okay, so we went back down directly to that room.
Okay, and you were given a set of keys for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you recall who gave you the keys?
I never got the keys. Somebody opened the door for me. I was just number 1 into that room.
Okay, so tell me, that suite in particular, if I told you it was suite 130, would that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Okay. That suite in particular, what's the proximity from that location to the location where you used the 35-pound ram to kick in the door?
It's on the same floor, on the same side of the building. Probably guess maybe 10 or 15 feet away. if
Okay.
That.
All right. Now, at this point in time, were the Detroit Police Department Special Response Team equipped with body-worn cameras?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was yours activated that night?
Yes, sir.
Now, how long would you say that your particular team was on this location from the time you arrived to the time that you entered Suite 130?
I guess maybe an hour, hour and a half.
Okay.
2 hours tops, but I'd be guessing at this point.
That's okay. Just an estimate, that's all we're asking.
Yep.
And during that hour, hour and a half, up to 2 hours, were other tactical teams also clearing other rooms?
Yes, sir.
Now, your body-worn camera would have a date and time stamp on it, if you know.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is going to be equals 347. I don't believe there's an objection.
No, there's not. We stipulate to the admission.
347 is admitted.
Let me just stop it for a second to confirm. This is December the 4th, 2021 at 1:33 in the morning.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is camera from your body-worn camera?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell us quickly, where is that camera affixed on your uniform?
I have it affixed to the right side of my chest, just underneath my magazine carriers.
Okay.
I have a lot of stuff here, but it's just a space pretty much right underneath my right arm.
We see a lot of stuff here. We're talking about the tactical vest you described?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Let me see those hands. Let me see those both hands. One person at a time. Let me see those hands. Yep. Hands. Let me see hands. Hands. Keep those hands where they're at. One hand. I'm gonna go hands. Turn around. On your stomach. Get on your fucking stomach. Hands behind your head. Good. Stand up. Stand up. What's your name? James. James what? Crumbley. Just one, two. Yep. Stay there. Let's walk up. Oh, yep. Can I move? We'll this mattress. Ready? These are yours. Those are mine. Those are mine. Put your glasses on. Look at it. Where almost. See this one too. Hold on, I gotta take the meeting back. No, I'll do it. Double it. Double check. Easy, right? a double check for weapons, so we're not missing steel on that.
And sir, we overheard an officer say with the double check for weapons, it's not the special response team's function to actually search for evidentiary items just for weapons?
Correct. At this point, it's more of a safety search. Before we let anybody into this room, we're going to make sure that we know where weapons are and make sure they're secure before anybody else coming from the public or not from our team is in that room.
Okay. And there were no weapons located in this search?
I did not find any weapons.
Okay.
No.
But an actual search of this location will be conducted by members of the crime scene unit. Would that be right?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Listen.
Sir, I stopped at 1:37 and, well, 1:37 a.m., 41 seconds, where my cursor is. This is a window?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, and those are the windows we saw in the photographs earlier admitted that face the parking lot?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you even know the identities of the individuals, if you recall?
I believe before we made entry, we were given information that we were looking for these particular people.
Okay. So it's James and Jennifer Crumbley?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fair to say it wasn't a Detroit Police Department law enforcement investigation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you were given the information that the fugitives could have been there?
Yes, sir.
Once James and Jennifer Crumbley were taken from this location, were they turned over to members of Oakland County?
Turned over to, I believe, our DFAT unit right at the door to this room.
Okay.
And that was that's when we as a team released custody to those.
All right, but that wouldn't have been your function, what happened with them after?
Right now.
Okay. Now, from the video, it depicts that they were found on a mattress on the floor of this suite. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have testified that you used a ram to breach a door about 10 or 15 feet away from the entry door to this suite?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was before that you made entry into this particular room?
That was initially when we first made entry into this building, maybe an hour prior to that.
Okay. And then this arrest occurred after teams, other tactical units, had already searched floors 2 and 3, as well as other rooms in floor 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is after all of those officers were on scene?
Yes, sir.
Now, in your experience in 10 years with special response, you said you've executed, if you could even ballpark, hundreds of arrest warrants. Was that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In your experience, have you caught anyone asleep before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what was your impression if James and Jennifer Crumbley were asleep or not when you entered the room?
Your Honor, I would object. This calls for speculation. The video speaks for itself, and really the appropriate person to ask is Mrs. Crumbley if she was asleep.
Okay.
Judge, I think the foundation's been laid that he's been on hundreds of these executions.
He hasn't seen Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley sleep 100 times.
Okay, well, I think he can describe exactly what he saw.
Sure.
I mean, if I close my eyes right now, I don't know if you'd know if I'm asleep or not. I mean, I probably am, but, you know.
Go ahead, sir.
But you don't know if someone's asleep just because their eyes are closed.
I'm just asking his impression.
Are his eyes closed? Were their eyes closed? Were they moving or not moving? Like, you know, you can ask those types of questions.
Paint the picture for us what you perceived.
As I made entry, I see two people laying on a mattress. If I'm not mistaken, they were facing each other, not moving, not making a sound.
Okay. And that's after your entire team entered the suite?
Correct.
Okay. And after the door was breached 15 feet away?
Yes, sir.
All right. I have nothing further.
Cross.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
In the video, after you guys find the people on the mattress, there's a person that's making yelling noises. Are you aware of who is yelling?
It would be Mr. James Crumbley.
And did you see or observe Mrs. Crumbley making any noises?
I did not.
There's a little bit of conversation we hear on the video about eyeglasses,
Yes, ma'am.
and that was Mrs. Crumbley asking if she could please have her eyeglasses.
Okay.
Is that fair?
To be honest, looking back at it, watching the video, I thought it was Mr. Crumbley saying that was his glasses on the mattress. And I just watched the video, so I may be mistaken.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
No.
Okay, you can step down and you're excused. The jurors' lunches are here. So unless you had someone super short.
I'm sorry, Judge, the jurors' lunches are here?
Yeah, if you had a super short witness, we'd take it now. If not, can you tell me who the witness next
No,
witness is?
but, we could rest today, Judge, so,
Okay.
we are gonna meet with the remaining witnesses we have, we'll decide how many more we need to put on. So, counsel has requested, to know, and I believe she should be prepared to begin her case today, if she chooses to present one.
Your Honor, I am going to present one, but I am not prepared as I've emailed
Okay.
the court a
Okay,
million
you could be
times.
prepared to present your case, if any, tomorrow morning. If the prosecution rests, I want to reiterate that the defense doesn't have to do anything. Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Crumbley can sit here and play chess if they'd like, all right? They don't have to do anything, but if they choose to do so, you can do it tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Pardon me, Your Honor, he left his phone.
Oh, okay, all
Uh-oh.
right. Okay, so, I'm gonna have you come back at 1:45. Okay, your lunches are here. Please don't discuss the case with anyone, with each other. Don't Google anything, don't go on the phone, don't post anything, don't read any news, and don't look at any TV about the case, all right?
All rise for the jury.
All right, you may be seated. I have a question for you, Rebecca.
Yes, Your Honor?
Okay, so, I got a response, from the people about, the assertion of privilege and the Fifth Amendment. I feel like we've mostly handled that, but since the defense filed something, I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond, which you did, but in your response, you say there's a separate non-public response.
Yes, Judge, because the information is covered by the protective order, we wanted to make sure not to put anything in the public domain.
Sure.
So, if that has not been sent probably to the court, I'll confirm with her.
Oh, okay, that was my question. Of course, we don't want it to be made public, but, your response references another response that we don't have yet. It might be there by now.
Your Honor,
I'll check.
I have not, and it might be in my email right now.
It probably is.
Was that filed today?
Just today.
Within like an hour ago.
Okay, so I need to review their response in whatever private document they submitted. I want to make sure the court received, there was a private document I submitted as
have
well
that.
as a public one.
I
Okay,
have that.
thank you.
In fact, I would be happy to give you my copy. I've circled some things.
If you would be so kind, I don't have a printer here.
Actually, we'll print you.
Thank you,
one.
thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, so I'll see you here at 1:45. If in fact the prosecution rests today, then you would, if you plan to present evidence, it would be tomorrow morning. But based on your motion and the response, I don't know if I need to make any further rulings with regard to the privilege issue and the Fifth Amendment issue. So that's kind of what I was waiting to see.
Okay.
I need to take a look at their response in order to evaluate that.
I understand. I do too. But
Okay.
I may or may not I have some ideas about what to do about that, but I wanted to see the prosecutor's response first, and of course you can see that as
Okay,
well.
that's understandable. Thank
All
you.
right. We'll print that for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All rise.
You may be seated.